started, I just wanted to say thank you all again for being here today. We are really excited to have you. My name is Dana Eckert, founder of Inspire. Inspire was built on the simple idea of providing services to help develop leaders with high emotional intelligence. As I was building out my platform, an idea occurred to me. I didn't want to just help leaders grow. I also wanted to provide an opportunity to spotlight the leaders who are already operating at this level. And so Inspire Leaders Spotlight Series was born. For our very first panel here today, what better topic to address than the shift that we're all feeling in what leadership requires? Today's world, as we all can attest, has complexity, constant change, AI, and it's really made the definition of leadership, it has evolved. And, that today we have a wonderful panel who is here to provide great insight on what that new model of leadership requires. As our panelists share their perspectives, we encourage you to add any additional follow-up questions in the chat. Assisting me today, we have Anthony Wen. He is here to keep an eye on the chat as we go along. Feel free to add where you're joining us from. And at the end of today's session, time permitting, we're going to pull one or two questions to ask our panelists. So again, whenever a question comes up that you want to ask, feel free to throw that in the chat and we'll pull a few of those at the end. So Anthony is also here to be monitoring for any technical challenges you may be experiencing on your end. So again, he's going to be assisting in that chat for you as well. All right. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to the panel that I know I'm so excited to have with me here today. So first up, I want to introduce Roger Lamb. Roger is the CEO of Ordify AI, and with his drive of making AI a practical operating system across businesses, he brings with him quite an impressive background in technology and AI, having worked with projects that served Netflix, Las Vegas Sphere, and my personal favorite, his former role bringing emotional intelligence into large language models. Next, we have Anna Marie Sampson, Vice President of Learning, People, and Culture at Nothing But Cakes. She is passionate, people-focused leader, strategist, and culture builder that not only helps support 800 locations and drives leadership today at scale, she also serves an organization that brings emotional intelligence into that brand experience, literally baked right in, as it were. And yes, pun intended. And then finally, we have Justin Roscoe, Vice President of Learning and Organizational Development at California Credit Union. He has an extensive background in organizational design and employee growth and was awarded Top 40 Under 40 Business Leader of San Diego. On a personal note, he also served as my mentor, where I got to experience his leadership philosophy firsthand of leading the whole person. So as you can see, we have with us a very exciting panel with a wide range of perspectives. I know I'm super excited to hear from them. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's go ahead and jump in to our very first question. Leadership has changed in theory, but it has changed in practice. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that again. Leadership hasn't changed in theory, but it has changed in practice, as we know. Where are you seeing that gap show up most clearly right now? Justin, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dana. Thank you for having me today. And it's a pleasure to be here. And also, I'm glad we're talking about AI because actually I used AI to write my background bio. So you read it perfectly. It was great. Dana, I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm noticing that and before I get to your question here, the age of the workforce leadership is evolving from baby boomers and Gen X professionals. And we're seeing a lot more millennials rise up into leadership roles and even a few Gen Z leaders. Yet, not many organizations are actively making a concrete shift in the way that leadership is fundamentally taught. Rather, they're relying heavily on the past generations to teach the future generations, but those concepts don't normally correlate just smoothly. So it's great to be here to talk about leadership philosophies, emotional intelligence, and how it blends with technology and the way that the workforce is evolving. So to get to your question here of leadership has not changed in theory, and you are correct. I mean, fundamentally, we still rely on clarity, trust, accountability, empathy, and results still matter. So all of that hasn't changed, but you're right, it has changed in practice because work expectations and the workforce have evolved. So in the past, in the way that I'm kind of seeing this at my organization and a few others, is that many leaders came up through this organization where leaders were developed in environments where they monitor output or they enforce policy or they solve problems personally. But again, those expectations have evolved. But in the past, leaders themselves haven't really evolved the way that they approach leadership. So they jump quickly to solutions instead of coaching. They rely on performance conversations that focus on tasks, not necessarily capabilities that are built. And while leaders understand in theory that feedback should be timely and continuous, they often default to annual reviews or corrective only conversations. And they avoid difficult conversations and hard feedback, right? So that leads to surprises with employees during those conversations. It leads to high performers being unsure as to how to grow or where to take their next steps in their career. And managers are uncomfortable addressing behavior early. And so eventually whatever they accept, they endorse. And so as a result, really, the practice isn't lining up with the words that are coming out. Right. And so the practice, though, needs to evolve. So leaders in today's world, they need to understand how to balance empathy with accountability. Right. They need to have consistent responses to burnout, stress, and disengagement, and steer away from defaulting to policy-based language when employees need human connection. And so I guess I'll wrap it up with this. The In today's world, leadership success is really measured less by what you know and more by who you develop. And so leaders must adjust accordingly and help people transition emotionally and not just operationally adjust.
I love that. I love especially the balance, empathy with accountability and shaping who you develop is something I continuously see as well. I would love to add to this perspective. Anna Marie, what do you have to add?
Yeah, thank you, Dana. And Justin, well said. I'll piggyback a little bit in as we're seeing this development of others and that call to leadership is still there. The role of leader, I think, has shifted so significantly in organizations. We are really asking leaders to do so much more than we have in the past, and often do that more with less. And so, what we're noticing is even if a leader is committed to developing the rest of the organization and being that culture ambassador and reaching into the lower levels of the organization to bring up high potentials, one of the things we're seeing is that that next generation of team member has looked at us all and said, "Ooh, I don't think I want to do your job." And it's a fascinating thing because we're saying you have potential and we're here to develop you. We want you to take on the next big role. And they're looking at us and saying, well, we see what you're doing and no thanks. And so we are tasked with this really interesting facet of leadership as well, which is to inspire that want and desire to take on more. And so now the core role of leader has evolved from, player coach to culture ambassador to therapist to navigating the shifts in the industry, everything they need to know to stay current in their role, help others. The many hats. I remember 20 years ago, we talked about the 7 roles of leader. I think we're now at 74 roles of leader. And so we just have to keep that in mind that that next generation is watching us and how we navigate this and inspire those future leaders. I think that is a major shift that we're starting to see in what has changed in years of late.
Absolutely. The do more with less is something I think most everyone can attest really on whatever role you have right now. That's just kind of the feeling that's out there. Roger, I'd love to hear how this shows up from your lens.
Being a technology leader and everyone pretty much see this today, I definitely echo you. feel like you have to do more, right? Like with less. And I don't think it's just at the leadership level. Every tier underneath it, people are feeling, especially with the expectation of AI technology today. In fact, I was just reading about how many people who have adopted to AI technology through a Harvard study, they find themselves, including in really big AI companies like Anthropic, have felt even more burned out using AI tool. It's not because the AI tool isn't creating the productivity that they're looking for. It's just that the expectation is that you're going to produce even more, and they are. But how do you use that expectation and balance that, and giving people the tool in order to accomplish a task, but also giving the employee the room to grow, to learn. And one of the major burnout that I saw when they were talking about this is that people don't have time during their real job to find time to learn on these tools, how to adapt it. And even worse, as I'm talking to so many different companies, they actually kind of fear people testing and using a lot of these new tools, but at the same time having the expectation of that we need to catch up with the market, having more AI into our operation and processes, but not having really a clear guideline because the industry are just moving so quickly. So one thing I do really see more and more the leader are looking into, especially the ones that are really good leader, having that type of empathy, is that they're looking at AI and kind of automation as a whole, not just a tool that they need to buy, but an organizational change. How do you manage this change across? How do you actually empathize with across the board how people are doing work, and in many cases are drastically different in how they operate. So if you don't provide your as a leader the the steps as to how you can reach there with this new paradigm of using this new tool and changing in automation, you really can't expect people to operate correctly, even if these tools are bringing in, massive amounts of automations or efficiency.
I love it. And particularly, I love your call out to the fear of testing this and organizations not giving employees really enough time to experiment with how it's used in their organization. I know in past, even before AI, we talked about leadership and encouraging a period of play for your organizations, playing with new softwares, playing with new tools. And I think that's just even more evident now with AI to allow employees that space to play and figure out where it lands. Um, so yes, thank you so much for that perspective. I want to move us into the heart of what drew us all to this conversation, and that is why are emotional intelligence, organizational insight, and AI literacy no longer separate leadership skills, but increasingly intertwined? Roger, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. So I do have a pretty interesting perspective being, I did had a founding company before at Silo where we were developing emotional intelligence AI, where we looked at basically how people communicate, how leadership interact with their rest of the group. We look at the communication profile. And what we found was that many of the times you can find patterns, and AI is very good at patterns into recognitions and also how people react. So you could use these type of tool to predict and help people align with how they should be communicating with their peers, with their superior, and just really aligning that type of communication. But at the same time, what we saw is that technology also brings, especially with AI, a lot of what we call kind of AI slap. People just generate a whole bunch of content, throw it across the wall, right? Or that they're just really short on really touching that human centric aspect. So with the tool and the AI interaction, people have to start understanding this is not just a tool, a technology, and you're representing yourself when you're communicating it across using these type of contents, right? Like if you just generate a whole bunch of contents using AI and you send it in social media or you send it across to your team without really understanding that context and how you're representing yourself, you kind of lose that little bit of yourself, or that you lose what your empathy that you're trying to get across, right? A lot of the times you lose it. So as we were developing AI using that, we try to look at, hey, how do we retain not only the voice and the what we call stellometry, which is kind of the vocabulary and different things like that, but also looking at how do people carry themselves across. Is this new voice that you're generating with AI carry across the same way if you were typing? And the answer is no. Like if you just use general LM like ChatGPT, you're not going to get that. In fact, even with memory concentration, it takes a statistical like you have to extract that out in order to put that back into this generated content. So I don't know how many people realize that as they're generating content using LLM, but in order to really get to that, you should put human in the loop as you're generating contents. You should be using it in a sense that make sure you get across, especially as leader. I think it shortcuts us to produce contents and get it across really quickly, but are you empathizing with people? Do you carry across with the tone that you need to? I think those are all important things that us people are adapting to this new technology should be thinking about.
And I actually have a follow-up just to throw at you randomly. I'm curious of your opinion of the voice to text that, ChatGPT and Gemini have. Does that keep kind of voice a little bit more than just typing it in? Do you have an opinion on that?
So that's really interesting. So I actually implemented the Gemini new feature where it does interact with 119 languages. You can switch on the fly. You can create agents with it now and can basically switch to almost feel like universal language with like the ability to hint at different language voice level and changes. So you can kind of hear the emotion coming across the voice now, which is really interesting as these develop. But it's actually more one way than bi-directional as I'm testing it. So one thing that you will see is that with any of the multimodal model, it is seemingly more human-like, but the actual ability for it to capture what your stress level and things like that and then reacting onto it, it's almost entirely based on the text model in the back and that's powering it. So if you don't inject that kind of emotional intelligence back into what you're trying to convey, the AI really don't know to get it back for that content to mimic what you're trying to get. So even though it's mimicking itself, seemingly, to be more excited or a little bit anxious, that's just more of a mimicky than actual producing content that understand, your emotion.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for the clarification. And yeah, I think that the heart of it is remembering that we are humans using it, not that it's just taking over everything kind of thing. So to dive deeper into how this translates into organizations, Justin, what do you see?
You know, a great question, by the way, Dana. How these skills are more intertwined today than they ever have been before, and it's going to continue to evolve as we continue to evolve in the workplace and adopt these technologies. But modern leaders, if they want to be successful, they need to operate in environments where people's emotions, organizational systems, and algorithmic inputs are all influencing outcomes at the same time. And so, in theory, if a leader was to review an AI generated performance insight, let's say, right, the AI literacy skill is required to understand what the data can and cannot say, right? The organizational insight skill is needed to interpret how incentives, workload, processes, or structure may be driving said pattern. And then the emotional intelligence skill is critical to discuss the insight without triggering a defensiveness or fear within the employee. So if any of those are missing, the decision ultimately and the process breaks down, right? So leadership is now about making sense across human, structural, and machine inputs. Whereas in the past, tools were neutral and passive, AI has evolved incredibly, right? AI is suggesting actions for managers. It's shaping priorities. It's influencing judgments. It's automating parts of our thinking. Really, AI is changing leadership fundamentally. These AI outputs, whether through large language models, as Roger was describing, or through any one of the other technologies that are out there, they affect people emotionally, the trust levels, anxiety levels, and motivational levels. Uh, AI can reflect organizational bias as well as design choices, but not necessarily objective truth. And so leaders must kind of translate and mediate that information in the relationship between humans and machines. So a leader who can understand AI but maybe lacks the emotional intelligence piece of it may just apply those insights bluntly, right? And who knows what the output or the underlying result is going to be from that. Whereas a leader who has maybe a high level of emotional intelligence but no AI literacy may overtrust or completely reject the tool and the technology in its entirety. So the effective level of leadership now requires a sense of emotional stewardship of AI informed work. So I agree with you completely, and that's why I love this question. They're all intertwining on a daily basis to be able to allow us and make those decisions that not only take into consideration the organizational objectives and the business challenges, processes, structures, et cetera, but it also takes into consideration the human side of the business, right? The human capital and the investment we need to make there.
I love it. I especially love how you described the three almost like an ecosystem. And if I got it right, you described AI as the data, what it can and cannot do,
Yeah.
the what the organizational insight as the drive for skill, and then the EQ as the insight to not have defensiveness and fear from
Yeah.
the
For the
objective.
human piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as much as we have the supporting output from AI or we have the automation that's in place, right? It still doesn't take away from the person behind the scenes who's actually making those decisions, providing the output, and either meeting or falling short of the productivity.
Yeah. Again, I love that translation between human and machine. Beautiful. So Anna Marie, I'd love to get your take on the human impact lens.
I think it's a really interesting opportunity as leaders for us to decide how to leverage the AI to enhance our leadership. But I will tell you that over years of doing this now and coaching executives, the best leaders are those leaders that have, obviously, we all know that human capacity, that emotional intelligence, the EQ piece. And I'll tell you a funny moment from just a couple of days ago. As you might imagine, here the conversation and Nothing But Cakes is really rooted in the business of joy. So I am working in an environment where human connection is at the heart of our brand. And so imagine the way that we all interact with each other to be true to that brand. It is a very human centric way. And I was working with a leader, brilliant mind, can take apart technology, build a computer from scratch, would be the first person to admit that his communication style does not always fit our warm and genuine connection, joyful brand. And we had something very important we needed to communicate to the organization. And he had crafted his response. And I said, ooh, we got to warm that up. And so he leveraged an AI to do that, gave it back to me. And the AI prompt he screenshotted with the biggest chuckle because the AI said, I've changed your message to help you sound more human. And we just had to enjoy that moment together. And the best part about it as the conversation continued of well, should we send this AI generated crafted response? And we both looked at each other and said, there's no way that anybody's going to believe that you said that. Who knows you? And it really centered on this idea of authenticity and that we can't let the AI take away what is authentic to ourselves as leaders. And our teams who know us well and who have experience with us will see through that right away. And so I think it really is about we must bring it into the way that we work, because if we hearken back to leaders being asked to do more with less, the AI is a wonderful way for us to speed ourselves up so that we can do our highest and best use of the human pieces, right? But our teams and our friends and our coworkers will know if it's not in an authentic way. And I think that will actually degrade our leadership. And so we'll have some judgments to make about how and when and what in the right way do we wield this new tool so that we can get all its benefits, but not lose the heart and the magic.
I love that example because it is so true. I mean, it's so easy because AI basically gives you a route to be like, oh, the perfect version of whatever. But as you pointed out, I mean, people can tell it's not you. And it's almost this like resistance of like, yes, that's going to sound so amazing, but I need to make it me. And kind of bringing it back to like, okay, it doesn't sound perfect, but it's more me centric. And I think that's, it's not a skill we've talked about yet, but it's where discernment comes into play. It's just as equally as important as kind of knowing when the judgment of AI perfection versus kind of that human touch to it. So I really love all of your guys' perspective and kind of how this all intertwines together. Next, I want to bring this down to the ground level. And so when leaders are doing this well, what does that actually look like in practice? Anna Marie, you see the lived experience every day. What does that look like from your end?
Yeah, I think the leaders who are doing this really well have figured out the balance. They understand where they and only they can offer insight, guidance, judgment calls. They're using that leadership discretion and really well. And often we know we develop that muscle through mistakes and we develop it through experiences and we learn and we adapt, much like the AI learns and adapts. We do that too. And I think the leaders who are having a lot of success have somehow figured out where that line is for themselves. And I can tell you from my personal experience, there have been so many times where the work has demanded something from me, and it is a task or an initiative or a project that I've probably done 1,000 times in my career, but it takes time and energy, and it is a maybe emotionally or mentally taxing kind of a task. And I know that I personally feel so much relief when I can leverage the AI to get me through the harder parts of that. But I still have to look at that and say, hey, is that correct? Does it apply in this organization? How do I want to leverage this? And probably the best use case that I've developed for it personally is to let it be my thought partner and then make my judgment call from there. And so we'll have conversations and I'll kick some ideas around and I'll say, what about? And what's the latest industry trend on this? And it will give me a response. And we can have that dialogue where I may not have time to tap into my actual real life network in the 20 minutes between my lunch break and the next meeting, but it gives me enough to say, okay, I'm thinking about this now, but I'm still doing the thinking. And I think that's where I'm seeing the success with it for me right now. And I think those other leaders who are doing that and figuring out ways to let the AI unlock their team from a speed and efficiency standpoint, but still doing what they do best, will probably come out ahead in this game.
I love the use of thought partner because you're right that it really is what, moving almost away from kind of the default of Google search of AI
Mhm.
and moving it into thought partnership. And I'm sure we'll get more takes from Justin and Roger on this, but it really you almost need to allow AI to get to know you, to
Mhm.
shape your voice, and then for you to challenge it, not take it as the default from there. So I want to layer another perspective. Justin, where does this extend into the leadership development lens?
Uh, it's interesting because I agree with so much of what Anna Marie just said, and I want to kind of take that and maybe piggyback off it a little bit. Leaders who are effectively doing this well, right, intertwining all of these skill sets into one, they definitely embrace this idea of AI in more ways than just, as you mentioned, using it as the, I guess, beefed up Google search, if you will. But rather, leaders are taking this data and translating it into meaning. What does it mean for our department or even the broader scope of the organization, rather than just using it to help make decisions, right? So leaders are using these AI insights as a starting point. It's not a verdict. It's not the end all be all, but rather it's the launching point from where they need to take the decision or the change initiative next, right? Explaining why this recommendation exists and how it connects to the larger system, and ultimately frame the data, excuse me, in a way that respects how the people will emotionally respond to it. Right. So what it sounds like in action is, let's say we have a compilation of data here. The data is flagging maybe a drop in productivity or output. But before we jump to any conclusions, let's also look at the workload patterns. Let's look at what recent system changes or maybe what compliance or regulatory changes might have impacted this drop in productivity before we go ahead and jump to these conclusions. But at the same token, I also want to hear how this change or how this drop in productivity is making you feel on the back end, right? So as a result, these skills, again, they're effortlessly and seamlessly intertwined, right? You're able to take the skill of AI literacy to understand confidence levels, understand limitations, or even potentially look for patterns in the workforce. Right. And now this idea or this skill of organizational insight kind of really creates a systemic lens to the contributors at hand, right? Whether it's due to staffing, whether it's due to incentive programs or anything in between. And then you rely on that human component, right? The emotional intelligence that helps you to understand how employees may anticipate fear or defensiveness or disengagement, or let's take it on the positive scale, right? And how they may embrace this and the reasons why they may embrace it, right? And ultimately, again, as Anna Marie mentioned, it's a balance, right? How do we balance this empathy with accountability while also using our technology and our systems wisely?
I really love you mentioned how you kind of challenged AI with looking for other perspectives. And I think that's just such like a really good takeaway for any use case of AI. Because as Roger mentioned earlier, what you put in is what you're going to get out. And so by simply asking questions like, what could I be missing? What other perspectives might be there? I think you're going to get, a wider lens because, of
For
course,
sure.
you're not adding in all the details or the
Yeah.
context that a machine will know.
And even in the chat, someone mentioned I'm learning to embrace this poke holes in this proposal type of prompt because really that's what we need to do is we need to find, okay, why might this not be perfect and how can we make it more relatable or how can we insert this maybe wild card into the mix here and get to the conclusion that's a little more logical and widely acceptable on a human level as well.
I love it. I love it. Well, Roger, especially as we think about future-proofing leaders, what would you add to this?
Yeah, so answering actually one of the question in the chat too about infusing our personality into AI for consistency and output, I think looking into future, it's not just about chatting anymore and getting an answer in. A lot of people are experiencing just like you guys are if you are able to question it, to be able to get insights using it as advisor, those are really powerful thing. And one thing that you see in the market and what Ordify AI is doing a lot is actually in the agentic agent base. So one thing that you are able to do is actually infuse kind of your brand or personality or certain traits into a set of AI, what we call agents, so that you don't have to constantly prompt it every single time to poke holes or have a certain perspective. You can say you're an advisor or you're a marketing manager. Those type of things actually makes it a lot more useful. And now with agentic, I think many leaders are starting to see it. The ones that are really kind of ahead of the curve. In fact, I recently got invited to be in a steering community for the UW system in University of Wisconsin to look at it because so many leaders are looking to say how do we learn about what actually is coming and how fast the market is changing. They really want to see, and one of the big thing is talking about agentic AIs and how it's actually really changing how they perceive things. So you could like I do right now. I have several like advisors AI that whenever I make decisions or looking at it, I can put them in a room. So I can put many different AI agents, and they can talk together. They can actually give me feedback at the same time with different perspective, which does give you a much more like holistic. I mean, that's kind of what you do, right? As a leader, you're trying to get different perspective, you're trying to think through, and now you can do that with like a PhD level, in your pocket, right? And that's really interesting because some of the AI, in fact, it's really interesting. They have almost like personality, you feel like. I have one of the AI that was advising me on venture capital and things like that. It's like, stop, do not do this. I'm like, what if I really want to do that? Well, I'm going to email your actual lawyer to really advise you not to do that. I'm like, okay, stop. I'm going to not give you my email access now to do that. But it's able to get to that realm of that advisement. And I think for a smart leader, the people that really want to get to the next one, they do have to look a little bit ahead of the curve to take advantage of some of these technology that's coming out. And I think it's going to come a lot faster than most people think. The leaders and the organization that are embracing some of these to get the different advice, to be able to craft it. Like, for example, almost all my clients that are working on it, they do have a personalized branding agent that they create because they want to sound like them or sound like their company when they produce some content. So putting that as part of the multi-agent workflow, whatever content that they produce, it has having that is a big difference than those that are just using AI that sound bland, right? Like so that type of perspective really changes, I think, how people are doing. The other thing I do think is that AI agents are starting to really not just changing the advice, like from chat to advice to kind of like personal assistant to really more of a implementer. I was just hearing a podcast on Jensen Huang, which is the CEO of NVIDIA. He was talking, he was asked actually, what is the smartest person that you know? And he paused right over there. Previously, he said would have been some really genius coder or someone who are really good at implementing. And as human, we really think those that understand the technology or be able to implement very complicated things are the smartest person in the room. But now that a lot of AI implementation, even including like NVIDIA itself into producing the latest chips and the designing even LLM now, being able to use AI for the implementer, the implementation costs are dropping significantly. And the people who are able to utilize the AI to do the implementation and understand what you can use on the technology for those implementation are really changing the kind of cutting edge type of technology. And I think that type of usage and understanding that as a leader, what you can use AI for implementation, not just advice or even chat, it's going to really change in the next 2 or 3 years. And it's going to come much faster than I think most people realize. And many of the leaders today, I think, will start to see it's like, well, if we are to do this, we probably should embrace some type of change management so people are able to see what should be worked on, what should be implementation by human versus AI versus advice and things that you get out of this type of technology.
I love the just leaving it with the change management strategy because I think that is what most organizations need to look at is, as you said, what's a human, what's person versus what's AI. And before moving on to the next question, I actually want to follow up with just the common question, particularly with your example with the lawyer addressing your lawyer. How do you handle the hallucinations? Is that still so common, or is that kind of fading out in AI?
So that is one of the main reason why in the last 2 years, almost all the AI company have shifted to agentic AI because you want to embed into each of the answer in question with enough context. The reason why majority of hallucination happen, it's because it doesn't have the right information. Either some of the AI one in chat, they are injecting it with internet knowledge. You really don't want your answer to be injected with like a Reddit answer, right? Like so having the right authoritative answer inside the actual context is really important. And one thing that you can do is not having to chat like 2 pages of information or attaching a whole bunch of document. And agentic AI does help you to do that. So every single time that you are talking with an agent, instead of just having a very much one sentence question, in the back, it shortcuts it. It's able to put in any type of info that you already embed into the knowledge of AI, almost training it, but it's not exactly training, it's injection into the AI context. And there are a lot of advanced techniques, including ones that we use at Ordify AI, like retrieval augmented generation, where you can search like all of your sales order or like all of the information through RAG and inject the right information at the right time into the agent to answer you without that hallucination. that really gets rid of that main problem because now it actually have the right answer instead of just trying to make it up. The problem with LLM is that they're all designed with the parameter to answer your question, and almost all of them are prompted to give you an answer no matter what. And when you do that, it will very confidently give you the wrong answer if it does not have the right context.
I love it. First, we've all experienced that for firsthand, for sure. But I love that perspective because I think as we talk about the emotional skills of discernment, knowing and understanding how the AI tool actually works, I think is really important. So, thank you for that added perspective. We've discussed a lot about what leaders must do. Now I want to zoom out. As leaders look ahead, what do they most need to unlearn or let go of in order to lead well in this next chapter? Justin, I can tell you're really excited about this question, so we're going to start with you on this one.
So much. I think that's the short answer. So much. There are a couple of things I think that kind of bubble to the top of the surface here in regards of what needs to kind of be let go of as we continue to evolve into this societal norm of embracing all of these various skills that are present daily. And the first one is just understanding that my role and my value as a leader is having the answers, right? That no longer needs to exist today. And in this crazy complex AI augmented world that we're in, no single person can fully know the right answer. As a matter of fact, your AI technology probably knows more of those types of answers than any one human can. Right. So AI knows how to surface patterns or provide answers, but judgment still requires human interpretation. It requires ethics. It requires context. So this philosophy of having to know the answers in order to have leadership value needs to be unlearned almost immediately, right? It evolves into this concept of your job isn't to know everything, but it's really to help your subordinates and your departments understand what truly matters. Secondly, I can go on, right? So much. Another philosophy maybe we should kind of go away with is that leadership presence means confidence without doubt, right? In today's world, employees tend to trust leaders more authentically, who leaders who admit uncertainty, right? Who explain the value of trade-offs, right? Not everything is going to be a win. Sometimes you have deposits into your credibility account as a leader. Sometimes you have withdrawals into the credibility account as leaders. And as leaders, we need to be able to build up enough of these small deposits so when a withdrawal is made, we don't go bankrupt and overdraw. Right? And me coming from the financial services industry, I thought that was just right spot on with me, deposits, withdrawals there. But the ability to explain those types of trade-offs, another skill of showing learning in real time is all of the kind of feeds into this idea that you're allowed to be confident, but you don't always have to express it without doubt, right? This false sense of certainty is easier to spot among employees and harder to trust. So as a result, your confidence needs to be paired with humility, vulnerability as a form of credibility. And that's where, again, the human element comes into play here, right? It's the reframing of your mindset that says, I don't have all the answers, but I am committed to getting this right alongside you, right? That's where the human connection kind of comes into play. If I had to pick on a third, it looks like we may have enough time for this here. It's this idea of that leadership is a role that I'm elevated into or that I step into, right? Leadership today is experienced, right? It's not title driven, right? So leadership is experienced in meetings, in how tools are rolled out or introduced, in how data is discussed, and how emotions are handled, especially under times of pressure. It's not episodic anymore, right? It's constant. Leadership is a daily practice, and every interaction can either add value or inspire trust, or it can take away value or decrease a level of trust, right? These moments daily are the critical ones that matter as it pertains to leadership. So it's this philosophy of how do I show up, especially when things are hard? That's where leadership comes into play.
I love your emphasis on not just title, it's experience. I mean, anyone who's worked in HR knows that, an individual contributor can have just as much as leadership skills as a people leader, and
Yep,
kind of calling that attention to it, I think is really important. So thank you so much for that perspective. Uh,
absolutely.
Roger, you bring such a unique lens at the intersection of leadership and systems. What do you think leaders need to let go of?
Yeah, so I was a VP of engineering for quite a long time, and I was leader for many organization beforehand. And this building team and using a lot of technology, a lot of people used to come to me to be like, "Hey, I have this problem. What type of tool can we get and buy?" Almost all leader automatically jump to that, especially when things are moving quickly. You want to save time, have more efficiency. I think one thing, if we were talking about unlearn, is when we're talking about more dramatic shift, like the foundational technology. I consider AI really like a foundational technology that are really changing a lot of the work. It's not something that you can just buy a tool and be done. I don't think that is something that should be looked at that way. And then you put it into a whole bunch of your employee's hand and just go at it, right? And that is not the type of things that you can just solve. And one of the most important things that a lot of people are starting to see is that AI has to step into from answering question to actually implementing work is that the work itself changes. And with that, it actually requires leaders to realize that and see around that corner that kind of Jensen's talking about to see, well, we actually need to have allow our group to experiment how our work change, giving time for them to learn how this implementation goes. So, for example, like just a couple years ago, I would say I would never use AI for majority of coding. Like I would say, like we probably use only 3 to 5% in terms of review and doing some type of work in engineering and hardware review and all these other stuff. Now, like I almost spend all my time into planning and figuring out what is needed. I'll put that into a plan, and the AI would do 98% of the work. I come back with a working software. Like the implementation's not even touched by human. That's kind of the world that I expect almost everything to go to, right? And now it's like going way beyond just coding. I mean, all my emails are being looked at, answer, analyzed, look at contracts, people to draft, and they're working together. That type of work, kind of coordination and understanding how it impacts the organization requires a lot of experimentation, honestly. And the processes that we're using are going to really change, I think, depending on those type of experimentation. And as leader, if we're not kind of looking around the corner, we're just telling people to just, here, I buy something for you, you just go at it. That's not going to really work well, where the processes are not going to really adapt to it, and you're just really getting your organization to adapt to AI versus having the AI to adapt into your organization.
So would you say it's almost like managers need to let go of the micromanagement of the time to work on X, work on Z, but I'll actually like give that kind of play that we talked about to.
Yeah, and main companies like one our VP of AI now, he was a senior data scientist at IBM, and one of the things that he got asked to is being a huge company, even at IBM, they realized being working on AI, they need these kind of tactical teams, smaller teams that they put together. So they put leader, implementer, different ones to look at how the work will change. And they basically have them report directly to CEO when they look at it. And these are huge organizations that are already doing that because they realize work in their with their employee are going to change. So they're looking around the corner and saying, hey, if we don't do this now, we're going to fall behind.
I love it. Anna Marie, to ensure the human impact stays central, what needs to be unlearned?
Is such a good question. And sort of to trail on to what Justin and Roger were both saying is I think there is going to be this element for leaders in at the core of who they are that has to shift here. And it would really be to unlearn or to let go of the rigid self-image that we have about our impact. And what we think is this is who I am and this is what I do in my organization to make an impact. I think will inherently need to evolve. And with that, that's hard. That's hard heart work because so much of what we do in our jobs is wrapped up in our identity. We spend a lot of time at work. We have this output that we've poured our heart and soul and our creativity and our thoughts into. And that is the work we've done. And it's the work that's made us successful. And that's ultimately how we view impact. But I think in this kind of new age here, the work will evolve, as Roger and Justin both alluded to. But I think we have to have a more fluid and flexible view of how am I then making an impact in my organization in new ways. And when we're able to do that, we can then get into this beautiful space of intentional leadership, where we leave the idea of we're good by luck or we're good by gut, and really go into we're great because we're intentional leaders to that impact. And when we're able to reassess and redefine, well, this is what that looks like right now, or this is what the organization needs of me here, or this is how my job has evolved, my new impact looks like. That can keep us really engaged as human beings and really in that place where we can be a light and motivate for others. It's almost the way we can take care of ourselves so that we can take care of the business and the organization. So I think that rigidity has to go and a little bit more fluid flexibility and our impact has to come in.
I love your comment about really the intentional leadership, and in particular, and this is a whole nother discussion, but really identifying it's not really just like luck that this is a side product. This is actual intentional work. You can build it as a system within your organization to ensure the outcome of high emotional intelligence leaders, AI literate leaders, and leaders who really know and understand the strategy of an organization. So yeah, I thank you all so much for your perspectives and your insights. I know I'm already walking away with a lot of great information. We do have a few minutes remaining, so I want to open up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions they want to pop into the chat that we can answer? Actually, I see one we pulled from Anthony. Lavinia has asked, do you think that the human connection piece will be affected by AI use if you don't infuse our personality into it consistently? So do we want to open up? Who would like to take the floor for that one?
Yeah, I think I answered a little bit about that before. I do think it does matter quite a bit in terms of how we are using AI, and part of it, if you want to shortcut it, I don't say, like, even for myself, when I'm using AI agents and creating so many of these contents and my email mostly that's kept up by agents, I don't have it sent directly to anyone. I always have a human in the loop. I look at the draft email, I change it, I want to do it. But one of the things that you could do is, like I was suggesting, to use these technology to inject your personality, to have a reference point of all your past interactions, maybe some of your writing that you would like to kind of come out. That way it will allow you to not have to sit there and edit, for probably more than you need to send an email out. That way you can just get 80-90% there, and you just have to adjust that last 10%. And that type of personality injection into it, it's not only possible, it's actually widely used today in terms of how people are using AI. And almost all of the more modern, like cutting edge type of models are really good at picking up those cues now. In fact, if you give it just future prompt from 3 to 5 paragraph, a lot of the times it's enough to pick up how your vocabulary and some of your sentence structure is already there.
I love it. Either of you want to add to that, or I have another question that came in.
I
No?
think he summed it up perfectly.
I love it. So Anne Marie, in this evolving space, Carlin asked, are there any core elements we should look at in establishing this fluidity?
Yeah, I don't know if you've had a chance to pick up the book. It's older now, but it's called Impact Players. It's by Liz Wiseman, and her book really talks about these shifts in how we go from being sort of this professional who is within our title and our scope and our job description, and we play within our lane, to really being this impact player across your enterprise or your organization. Sometimes I joke that I'm the Swiss Army knife of bundt cakes, because I have a lot of different hats that I need to wear and a lot of different things that the organization needs. And some of them are squarely in my background and some of them are not. And it is that willingness to, flex into the space of, I don't know everything about this, but I sure do know design thinking. So let me see if I can get us somewhere. Or I don't have a background in guest experience, but let's try that today because that's what we need to solve for. And so I don't know that there are competencies, to point to. There are so many, of course, and skills that you want to develop. But I really think it's just more of a mindset that we want to try to adopt and to push ourselves beyond that comfort zone, to be willing to go where the energy is in the room. I think it's a mindset.
Absolutely. Justin, Roger, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Anna Marie hit the nail on the head. It's not necessarily one set of elements, rather, but it's a step above that, right? It's about making sure that we're framing the way that we approach these daily tasks, responsibilities, and whatever's asked of us, right? And it's this mindset. And if I can really call on anything that I've learned in the past, it's this idea of, oh, this is something I have to do, but rather reframe my thinking and say, this is something I get to do. Right. And to that point of Anna Marie, where yeah, you're the Swiss Army knife, but you're so valued because you've opened your mindset to welcome these different ideas or these different challenges and opportunities. And so you embrace it as a thing that you get to do, not a thing that you have to do. And so again, rather than really drilling down to a few core elements, I think we take a step above that and we go on the top of the mountain and we say, okay, let's just shift the mindset overall.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, that looks like all the questions that we have for right now. So as we wrap up today, I just want to pause and thank everyone here. Thank you for our panelists, not just for your expertise, but your real lived leadership perspectives. I am so grateful for your time, your thoughtfulness, and the examples that you brought into this conversation today. Thank you to everyone who joined us today to join us live. The questions, the engagement in the chat, and simply just showing up for these conversations really do matter. The Inspire Leaders Spotlight Series was created to elevate leaders who are already operating with emotional intelligence, clarity, and integrity, and to make space for conversations that feel honest and practical, not just theoretical. And I think, at least from my perspective, that's absolutely what we've achieved here today. Following today's call, you'll receive a brief follow-up email with the recording and an optional feedback link. If today's conversation sparked reflection for you, I'd love to hear what resonated. Other than that, just thank you again for being part of our very first Inspire Leader Spotlight series conversation. We do plan to have these quarterly, so look out for those. But I hope you all get to leave here with something you can carry forward into leadership. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks,
everybody.
Dana. Thank you, everyone.